Hey everybody, Dave Whitmarsh and Shane Watson here to give you a quick overview of how to find your total cost of ownership when it comes to payroll valuation. It's going to be a short participation on my point, and then Shane's going to get into a demo. So hopefully you got that ready to go, Shane. But I'm just going to run through a couple things that I've found here and sort of set the tone for what we're up to. So this section's on how to or understanding the total cost of ownership when it comes to your payroll. And there's many different ways to take this, but from snapshotting on some industry notes, and I'm sure you guys have all taken a look around, you can see ADP and PwC did a study. 50% of costs come from HR software implementations are hidden. G2 claims 78% of firms calculate deeper costs than just licensing fees. 5% of companies only include subscription and licensing fees. 17% factor in human support as a part of every evaluation, and 63% say switching is feasible, but time and resources often get in the way of making those decisions. And then we have another industry expert, Gardner. 84% of HR software buyers face implementation cost exceeding expectations. And I found a source that I couldn't put a name on it, but it said 37% of buyers regret decisions based off of evaluations or based on evaluations and implementation cost. So that's a little snapshot here. And then I have Shane's email. I'll make sure Shane's email, my emails, in or way to contact us is in the body of the description here. And we're going to turn it over to Shane now to do his thing and talk about all the technology he's built and all the good stuff around that. So your co-host Shane, you can take over the screen.
Okay, let me start to share and make sure I can do that. Can you see my screen?
Got it.
Okay, so what I'll be trying to cover today is kind of our method and way of doing total cost of ownership for payroll. We'll focus just on payroll, Dave, since this is kind of the purpose of this call. But just so everyone is aware, when we come into an organization and do our thing and do our studies, we can do including and addition to payroll. So as you see here in my model, we can do payroll, we can do time, HR, benefits, recruiting, comp, learning, performance, and even finance pieces if we want to switch on general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, cash management, tax, and building, budgeting, and forecasting. So our tool can be set up and configured in any combination of these pillars. But since we are talking about just payroll, let's keep our focus to that.
Sounds good.
So I think the first thing that I'll talk about is our methodology. And what I mean by that is, when we step into an organization and give them a series of surveys to collect information to determine what their payroll total cost is, what is the recipe of information that we're gathering? And so I want to talk about just for a minute these elements of cost as we see them right here. And you'll notice as I hover over them, I'll get a little box that explains what these different things are. So, processing labor would be the employees who perform human capital type functions or finance related functions. So, In the case of payroll, they would be the members of the payroll team. They could also be a portion of a person who works in finance who may come over and help payroll at the end of the year, do W-2s and tax forms and those kind of things. So really, it's the people that are involved in delivering the gross to net payroll in terms of what processing labor is. The second group of labor or bucket of labor that we evaluate is the technology labor. So this would include any IT personnel or HRIS personnel that are required to do reporting or help desk support or database administration or interfacing to other platforms or whatever that technical function might be, what's required to support that payroll system from an IT, HRIS technical standpoint from a people perspective. And then the field labor is the third bucket of labor that we evaluate. And this is really just kind of helping us understand how well customers, who are the employees and managers of the organization, can work with payroll in the different areas that we might be evaluating. So we're going to look at things like, if I'm a manager in your field, how much time do I spend handing out physical paychecks on a per pay period basis? What does it look like for me to respond to questions around payroll related items, manage leave, be able to tell people what their balances are, all those kind of things that I might have to do as a manager. So there'll be questions around collecting that. Then there's a non-labor function here. So the processing non-labor, a lot of times these don't reduce much in an ROI perspective. But because we're doing a total cost exercise and we're benchmarking against data from other people who have given us data against this entire data set, we want to collect this information. But this is going to give us the facility costs of the people over here working in buildings and all of those kind of things. So things like rent, leases, utilities, furniture, overhead costs, printers, operational type things. Also encompasses departmental budgets within the HCM and finance functions, obviously outside of payroll because I would have collected that over here already. But just things that are relative to those different areas. And then this would be the system maintenance non-labor. I call this the raised floor computer room costs of the system. So licensing fees that we might be paying for third-party hosting centers that we may have involved in the deck, costs that we might have for disaster recovery and backup, um, you know, investments in other pieces of the process here, toner, different things like that that might be required to process checks. Just everything from a technology standpoint that we're paying for would go here. And then over here, outsourcing fees would be relative to temporary labor or consultants that we might bring in. It would also include partners. So, maybe we have one person processing our payroll, but we may have another vendor like ADP or Dayforce doing our taxes or W-2s and garnishments, as standalone services there. We could have a pay card provider that does some of our pay cards. So just any partner that we have in here, we're going to collect under this area. And then lastly is the risk and opportunity. And these are, why we're doing this and collecting all this data and trying to understand your expenses. We also want to understand where your risks and opportunities are. So opportunities would be things like, are you taking advantages of WOTC tax credits where you can? Um, how well integrated are you between your benefits and payroll and HR systems? Are there rules-based demographic engines in there and those kind of things that dictate how those rules and drops in coverage and all those things take place, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of the structure that we use to determine our total cost. I'm actually looking through a total cost of ownership report right now. So you'll see we'll have costs against all of those 8 areas of cost that we talked about, these elements of cost up here. We can drill into those and actually see where those numbers are coming from. The way that we actually collect this information, and again, since we're just talking about payroll, if we engaged with an organization to do this, you would get 2 surveys. One would be this general information survey. Probably the best candidate to complete it would be your payroll manager and maybe a couple of members of his or her team. But this is just some demographic information. So, number of employees that you have, how many of those are salary versus hourly, how many managers do you have, number of new hires per year, average rates of pay, number of pay frequency, and different pay categories, all those kind of information. These are just used mainly to calculate other things. And then you would also get a payroll survey that looks like this. And, what I'd like to just kind of draw your attention to here is as you look at this survey, once it comes up, sorry for the slow internet here, but down the left side of the page, this will follow very closely that methodology that we reviewed on the report. So here is the processing labor, and you can see where, we would give this survey to an organization. They would go in here and put their resources, click this little button over here and tell us, where they're spending their time, doing what in different areas. This would be the processing non-labor, where we'd get, things like postage and courier cost and spend in document storage and spend in temporary labor and those kind of things. This would be the IT labor. So, folks that are supporting the system and everything like we discussed. This would be the system non-labor. So you can see they have, Oracle with a license fee of 164,000, 6,200 in disaster recovery and backup, 12,000 in hardware and depreciation, those kind of things. This would be the outsourcing category, the field labor questions, and the financial and risk. So basically the process is they fill out this survey. That survey goes into our database and then automatically creates this total cost of ownership report that tells us what they're spending in these different areas and kind of gives us that in summary. And then we also have the benchmarking that comes along with that.
So talk about the benchmarking. What's that, Shane?
Well, because we've done 25,000 of these studies over 25 years, we have the ability to kind of look at your numbers and benchmark that across 3 different benchmarks. One that we use is on peer group size. The second that we use is on peer group industry. And the third is on peer group platform being leveraged. So just in real simple terms, here's total cost of payroll for this organization. If we divide that by their 8,200 employees, they're at $577 per employee per year. Here are, 12,050 or 1,251 companies that are between 3 and 10,000 in size. Their average cost is 427. Here's 3,402 companies that are in this peer group of manufacturing. and that average is 1251. And here's 224 Oracle payroll users and what their average cost is. So we're just trying to get kind of an idea of where they measure up. It doesn't mean that we're not looking for this to be cheaper or more expensive. We're looking more for outliers. And, to get that dialed in even closer, we can go over to the TCO detail. And now we're breaking out that, $574 cost against the element of cost structure. So we can actually see what's labor versus what's field labor versus, this really starts to tell us, hey, we're throwing people at a problem, or we're underinvested in technology, or, we're really throwing a lot of work to our field instead of doing things within the departments. This starts to really kind of tell you the compelling story.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? And so, do you
Now,
find, one second, Shane, do you find that most people, when they come to go through this, they, for lack of better words, they have a, they smell and smoke, and they just want to take a look before some fire happens, or do they, or is it just, requests of like, what are we doing here? How much are we spending, or what's our total cost? I guess
well,
another way to word that would be, do they usually come with you with some form of an issue before they do this, or do they just come and ultimately do a best practice first?
no, there are usually some compelling issues that bring them to the table. It's several things. It can range from, we don't like what we're doing, we just don't really like our technology, we don't like its functionality, we don't like the way it works. It could be dissatisfaction with contract. It could be that they are, on a 20-year uh, upgrade treadmill and they're tired of it. They're tired of that every 3 years spending 200 grand to upgrade some legacy ERP. It could be that, they're just trying to upgrade their technology. They're on something older and they're trying to bring things into a more modern era. A variety of reasons bring them to the table. Um, I think the purpose of the total cost and where it really serves well is because of all those reasons, David, we just talked about. There's obviously going to be the potential for a huge variable in spend as it relates to the system only. So if I'm on a 25-year-old legacy version of Oracle or PeopleSoft, or call it whatever you want, chances are my licensing fees are quite low. And I am going to pay those upgrades and things periodically, but if I'm now going to total outsource that to a Dayforce or a UKG or an ADP, I'm probably going to double or triple my costs as it relates to just the system.
Yeah,
And so if people just look at that, it becomes very difficult to change anything. So I believe the value of the total cost is it paints a very good picture of where expenses are happening at the labor points, at the non-labor points, at the technology support level, at the integration level, clear across the board. And that opens the gate for, well, yeah, we might be doubling our cost in terms of what we spend on the system, but here's a really good picture of how it's going to impact all the other areas.
right.
So where our licensing fees might double, we may only need 4 resources instead of 8 to process the payroll. We may need no one to support the payroll engine because we've now totally outsourced that to a supplier so those two people could go back to work and do something else. In all of this, we may have reduced a 3% error rate by 1%, which probably is going to pay for this entire project itself. But we've now got on paper a really good understanding of what we're spending across the board, what we're getting by the investment that we're making, and how it is going to make us more efficient in all of the other areas. And it'll provide us a really good idea of how does that tilt the balance sheet? Is that in our favor or not? And if we can get all of those gains, get all the efficiencies, and the ROI is there, in a 36-month period, or most of what we see is there within a year period. But now we're making decisions based on really good data and really good business.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
what else Shane has, or Clearview WorkSuite has that I love, is the ability to benchmark against other vendors. As you saw, Shane showed, in manufacturing, I can't remember the employee size, how many people with Oracle. You can actually get your data in there and then do a comparison against ADP or Lawson or Dayforce or UKG, and it'll give you a benchmark on your cost based off of those other vendors, and that to me is just very
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, we can show that. I mean, before we jump to that, the other relevant thing I think that is important here is once we've done this total cost, we now need to build an ROI. And so the way that we do that is, we have a calculator builder, and as this data comes into the surveys in our tool, it splits up and goes to the calculator, and it splits up and goes to the total cost of ownership report. We can now build many calculators against this total cost structure. So we could look at, hey, what am I going to look like if I do a deal with ADP and do managed payroll? Or what am I going to look like if I do a deal with ADP and do the payroll in-house myself? Or what am I going to look like if I do UKG versus ADP versus Dayforce? So all of that can now be constructed once we have that total cost data in our calculators. And, if we work with vendors, it becomes very easy because we help them construct these ROI profiles that basically pre-build the savings percentages against certain pieces of the ROI and allow us within a single mouse click to get to the ROIs instead of configuring every little item. But once that gets all done, we are able then to build a report that looks like this, and this is the ROI overview. So, kind of gives them, here was your total cost. Here's what that total cost will reduce to based on the workup that we've done. Here is your total savings. Here's the portion of that we think is direct and indirect. Here's your risk impact, so forth and so on. So this is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of making decisions. You've got the total cost data, and then from that total cost information, you can build these ROIs and figure out kind of where you're going to land. Now, kind of getting to Dave's point, I'll go over here to main dashboard and show you what he was talking about on the analytics side. So I can run out here and do a benchmark comparison report. This happens to be an ADP environment because they're a client of ours, but you can see this sales guy ran this for this company. And I can go out here and say, I want to look at companies that are 3 to 10,000 in size. I would like to look at all industries. I want to look at comprehensive and express studies in my draw. And, I might want to look at payroll, time, and HR, go to look at everything. Uh, since I'm an ADP sales rep, maybe I'm trying to sell this person Lyric, but I want the payroll side of this to be managed services. And so I can select that, and maybe my competitor is, I don't know, we'll say it's PeopleSoft for this example. Just see what we get here. And we'll go ahead and create our report. So this is now hitting our database, looking at the 25,000 studies that we have, and kind of determining some average things. So you can see we included payroll, time, and HR. So for payroll, it had 248 companies. We looked at all industries, 3 to 10,000 people using PeopleSoft. Here is the average savings per year for those prospects moving from that to this proposed technology. For time and labor, we had 111, and for HR, 198. We'll have a summary over here that gives us the savings, total of $5 million per year across these three platforms in terms of the ROI opportunity. All of these reports can be, accessed and drilled into, and you can go in and see where the foundation data is coming from and all that kind of stuff. So some very good information here in terms of that. Um, also have the ability to run executive summaries off of this. So this is kind of a cool feature we just put in this week. But basically what happens is when we run this data across all these other tabs, the AI picks up that report, reads it, and says, "Hey, give me an executive summary in good plain English about why these savings take place and where." So I get kind of just a very basic English explanation of why this is a good ROI.
Very cool.
So pretty cool little summary there that comes up. We keep it very simple. It's a 1 to 2 page explanation, and then you have the ability here to export it to a PDF. Do all of those things. Within the next week or two, we'll be rolling this out at least to ADP in a mobile app.
Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of exciting that they'll have the ability to do this off of an Android or iPad or iPhone, but at least be able to run these kind of summaries.
Yeah. What amazes me here, Shane, is so a lot of times when organizations of that size, 3,000 employees, get in, start to smell smoke in their payroll department, and they know something's up, they'll bring in a consultant or hire a person, and they'll try to dig down and find some of this data, try to figure out what's going on, and then give some recommendations. Now, we know that if you engage with a big consulting firm, this is what effectively Shane just showed you in 31 minutes here is could be $100,000 consulting gig, and it could take um, 6 months to a year to actually wrap this up. And so if you jumped on and not, if I'm stepping out of line here, Shane, feel free to correct me, but Shane does these payroll studies for $5,000, right? And so this is a that's a minimal amount that you can get approval for anywhere, and you can get this done. And now you're working with real data, real understanding your process, with access to see if it even makes sense to be looking at another vendor or if you should just bring on a staff to, douse water on the fire where it might be. But this is real business. This is real impactful data that can help your organization. Do you see it that way, or am I reading that wrong?
Me? Oh, yeah, definitely. I think this is the gold standard for anyone that's changing any platform. I mean, there's too much at stake in some of these big enterprise type platforms that we're dealing with payroll and HR and all these kind of things. They're very complicated. They're very integrated. They're a lot of sophisticated data flowing through those different systems, and it's just not something that you can attack lightly. I mean, you've got to do proper planning, make sure that you're getting things that have uh, good functionality to them. All of those kind of things are just of a paramount importance today.
Yeah,
So, yeah, why not do it right? If you're going to do it right. And
yeah,
what I love about our process is you can keep it centric to payroll, but then you also have the ability to Lego building block out. So maybe payroll is my biggest challenge right now. I need to get a new payroll system, but gosh, eventually I'd like to have an integrated payroll HR, and maybe I'd like that to be the same vendor in an integrated box. I can activate the HR survey, evaluate that a year from late now, or, I can even have me evaluate payroll, HR, benefits, and recruiting, even though I might only do payroll. At least I now have a strategic understanding of where my expenses are in those other areas, and so I can make better business decisions.
yeah. Okay,
So,
so we intentionally showed you a lot, and also in the same sense didn't show you everything that you need. So what we're hoping we can take as a call to action here, if this is something that your organization or if you're a vendor and you want to work with your customers and get access, then again, take a look at the body wherever this is. You'll see um, contact information for myself or Shane, and you can reach out and we can actually run you through your scenarios and how we can help and ultimately help you build a case, help you understand your total cost of ownership, and help you move to something new if you need it, instead of picking up the phone and spending 100 grand with a consulting firm. Not that we don't love consulting firms, because they're also going to hopefully have access to this too.
yeah.
But it's really a great tool, and hopefully we'll speak to you on a one-on-one basis. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Shane?
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive, Dave, for what we're trying to do here today.
Yeah.